For now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go into our first panel discussion for today, and it's something that I'm interested in as well. It's financial resilience in the gig economy. It's going to be moderated by the one and only Prof. Ghosh. We have again Assistant Professor Aurobindo Ghosh, Program Director, Citi Foundation-SMU Financial Literacy Program for Young Adults, and we're also going to be joined by our panelists. Let's meet our panelists right now. First, we have Karl Mark, who is CEO and co-founder of Hepmil Media Group, SGAG. You guys might know that. Hi, Karl. How's it going?
Hello. Good to be here, man. Excited to be joining you guys this Saturday afternoon.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Thank you for joining us as well. Now, Karl is also joined by Divisional Director, Income Security Policy Division, Ministry of Manpower. Please say hello to Feng-Ji. Hello.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here today. I really learned a lot from all the presentations earlier, and I hope to have a great dialogue later.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now we've seen three gentlemen already. We're going to be introducing yet another. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CEO and founder of WhyQ Private Limited. Please say hello to Varun Saraf. Hey, Varun.
Hey. Great to be here.
Now, the big question, Varun, is WhyQ? Why? All right, without further ado. Yes, Varun, yes.
The name answers itself, right?
Right, you're right. Absolutely. You're solving a big problem. And it's a problem that we have in Singapore all the time, right? Like some people just queue up and don't know what they're queuing up for. So why queue? I don't know. Ask the lady in front
Exactly.
of me. Anyway, gentlemen, have a good panel discussion. I'll be back in just a bit, and I'm going to hand it over to Prof. Ghosh. All yours, sir.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Once again, very warm welcome to all the panelists. We have exciting set of time over the next 50 minutes or so to have discussions on something which is actually very, very close to my heart. And so before we move on to our quick introduction across the board, I will actually pose an audience question first to the audience to check on their interest. So can I have this question on, are you a gig worker, number one? So how many of you have been gig workers? And if you're a gig worker, what work do you do? So if you could go ahead and yeah, so Hagen, our chairman of the person of this particular event has already launched it. So please take a look at this QR code that you are as out there, which is in Meeting Pulse, and answer that question. Are you a good gig worker? And if you are, then what particular area are you in? So with that particular, sort of an engagement to start with, as we can see that, this whole online experience have completely changed the way we interact. We are now interacting one-to-many, which we could not actually have done when we were actually directly facing one-to-one. So let me first start with introducing myself for those of you who might have joined in just late. I am assistant professor of finance education in the Lee Kuan Yew School of Business, Aurobindo Ghosh, and I am also the program director for Citi Foundation-SMU Financial Literacy Program for young adults. My other hat that I had to kind of present before, I am the principal investigator for research as well for that. So I am responsible for running some of the surveys that we do along the way as well. What is my interest in doing this? One of my research areas is financial inclusion. So what are the things we need to try to break boundaries so that people can actually go ahead and access financial services and also ask for services that they might actually need. So those are the things that I want to know. What are the main impediments and how we can actually address this to some extent. So my kind of, in some sense, my idea of looking at this problem is from the ground level. And I mentioned to Kyle that I'm going to mention him again. So one of the reasons why we are talking about this particular topic on resilience in the gig economy is when I was actually driving back home one day and I heard Kyle having a discussion on CNA, News Asia 938, And I love the discussion and the talk about how he was resilient and how he actually prepared to face this new normal, where a lot of these events, because of social distancing and other safe management rules, were being cancelled, left, right, and center, and he had to reinvent, had to pivot to try to figure out how to handle this challenge. So those are things that are inherently true for a lot of creative industry as well. But it's not just creative. When we talk about the gig economy, it used to be just for the creative industry, but it has expanded. In fact, if there are some surveys that are actually done of late that I was looking at recently. They are saying that, well, there is a lot more young adults who are going into the gig economy right now. They are actually working there, sometimes to supplement their income, and sometimes even to explore what options they have. So in a way, there are multiple reasons that this is happening. So this is sort of one of my main reasons that I wanted to look at this particular topic, and of course get information from all of you experts to look at your point of view. So if I may, could you please, if the panelists could tell us a little bit about yourself, so a brief introduction and their job, their job description, as well as how they are related to the gig economy. So if I may start with Karl first, and then we will go to Feng-Ji and finally to Varun. Yeah.
Thanks, Prof. Hi, guys. My name is Karl. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hepmil Media Group. We own and operate platforms like SGAG, and we also have a company called Hepmil Creators Network. So I was a SMU graduate from School of Economics back in 2013. And in relation to the gig economy, we have an entity that basically works with a lot of independent content creators. Many of them are students themselves, and they don't do this full time. So they actually receive jobs from our company when we want to engage them to make branded content for advertisers to basically publish onto their social media accounts. And we have since worked with over 500 of such creators in Singapore and around the region. So that is a little bit about me, as well as how we are working with the gig economy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karl. So Feng-Ji, if you can share your thoughts and to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, hi, I'm Feng-Ji. I'm from the Ministry of Manpower. So I head this division known as the Income Security Division. So what we do look at are things related to helping people be more financially resilient, such as the Money Sense campaign, but also CPF-related policies. And we also look at groups such as the self-employed as well as low-income workers, right? So those are some of the groups that we look at. Most recently, I think PM spoke a bit about platform workers, and that's one of the areas that we've also been looking very closely at. So what our relationship is that we look at the labor relations, but we also look at how we can help them get more income security for themselves, such as through insurance, savings for the future, CPF, and other schemes. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So if I may hand off to Varun now to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you are related to the gig economy.
Hi guys, I'm Varun, CEO and co-founder at WhyQ. So at WhyQ, we've been focusing on digitalizing hawkers for the last about close to 5 years now. And we work using a pretty unique delivery model. So I'm sure some of you guys that have seen us around. So we employ a lot of workers from the gig economy, right? Like any other food delivery service, we are very heavily reliant on this particular industry. We've also created a very interesting and unique role, which is a co-part of our business called a hawker captain. So we work across about 60 hawker centers and have about 3,000 hawker stalls, right? And the people that we use to manage our entire operations, very key people are hawker captains who are stationed at hawker centers, and they perform a key role of collecting food, packaging food. And these people, it's actually an interesting role because we feel it's quite inclusive. We have a lot of students taking part, and we also have a lot of elderly people taking part in this. So I think it is a little different from your standard food delivery gig economy roles.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. I mean, this is perfect. It's like almost my dream come true. I'll explain why. Because we have a real 360 view of the gig economy. You are looking at the policy making, which is coming from MOM guidance about helping particularly gig economy workers who might not be as privileged. It's not sometimes a choice for them, it might be a necessity for them. And obviously going to Karl, looking at what are the main outlets and how do you organize the gig economy to some extent, giving the creative individuals or even individuals who are creative by nature, to give them an option, an outlet to look at that as well. And finally to Varun, looking at this whole idea that gig economy might be only for the younger people. That might not be true, because when you are looking at this whole idea that it's not, if you look at COVID a little bit more, that the suffering is not really restricted to any particular age category, even though young people are suffering. But when you look at hawker stalls, hawker centers, who might have done this day in and day out, every day of their life for 40 years, and suddenly they find themselves in a completely new normal, and they do not know how to react. So they need the help. So providing the hawker captains, that might actually help sort of multiply the number of jobs that could be there in that particular location or position. So let's take a look at the result of the poll. Or do we have a result of the poll, Hagen? How many are there? We don't have the numbers yet. Okay, so there are quite a few if you look at the ones that are stating what they did. Okay, so some are not yet a gig worker yet, but there are some who are still kind of thinking. We have only about 40, which is unlike the polls that we have. So I think we will have some more. Maybe we can come back and take a look at it later as well. So indeed, there could be a huge number of jobs, for example, social media influencer and others. These are all part of the gig landscape that is there. Now, I wanted to, sort of move forward. There are some studies, as I mentioned, which found that almost 56% of, in young adults, which is for a study that was done in the US, they are basically saying that they are part of the gig economy. As I mentioned, the reasons might be both to supplement income or to try out different areas as well. So I wanted to kind of start off with the next one, which with some questions about, what are the big impediments that gig economy workers find. So what is the greatest impediments, if I want to say it to you, when deciding whether or not you want to join the gig economy? So the main options in such a question. So if you can, I think we do have a question there as well. Yeah, so the second one is launched. As we are going towards it, I mean, there are some impediments that gig economy workers face. So if I may, just to get the panelists' view a little bit about what do you think are the main challenges faced by gig economy workers if they are planning on going into the gig economy. So we can maybe start with Varun first, and then we will go into Feng-Ji and Karl as well.
Right. So definitely there are a lot of challenges faced, right? Because the people who are taking part in this economy, the way it's structured as well, it's designed to be very competitive and sort of cutthroat, which is something that we felt when we were designing our model. We changed that a little bit, but the nature of the gig economy is such that people are incentivized based on hitting certain metrics, certain milestones, and it is designed in a way that like I'm talking mostly about the food delivery segment here, where we see a lot of people taking up the delivery courier jobs and other jobs, right? Those are designed to work on metrics that really push people, which is something that we feel if is given more of a structure or is defined in a clearer manner would really help the industry in general, right? Because right now you have some people who are doing well and hitting those metrics and really doing things at a breakneck speed and getting there, but you also have people who are not able to cope with it. And we see that a lot, that there are a lot of people who are not able to cope with the demands of the gig economy, and then they sort of left behind. So even though they're part of platforms, they're not getting the income that they could have if the structure was designed a little differently.
Okay, okay, very nice. Karl, do you want to share something about the barriers to entry into the gig economy as well, if I may ask?
Sure. I think for example, content creators, we see that many young people actually aspire to become maybe even a part-time or full-time content creator. I think in a recent survey done by my primary school, the principal cited that the top 10 jobs in the graduating class of primary 6 students, being a YouTuber, for example, was right up there, which is a very interesting thing, right? Because I think the reality is the patterns of consumption have changed, and many young people are watching their favorite content creators make YouTube videos, make vlogs, even play games, right? And get paid for a living. And I think that has, to a certain extent, maybe set a bit of a cultural clash, especially in an environment like Singapore, where I don't think all parents are necessarily receptive to the idea of, hey, mom, I want to just play computer games all day and stream myself on Twitch or on YouTube and make that my career, right? But I think it's certainly very aspirational. And I think to put in the kind of effort to reach significant traction before you can actually start getting paid via social media or via client work is something that takes time. And I think that is something that I think culturally we see as one of the big challenges. Obviously, those individuals who don't have the same maybe parental or expectations from family and the environment they're in, they're able to do so. But for many who aspire to join this industry actually struggle because they aren't able to get traction needed.
Okay, okay. So Feng-Ji, if I may ask you, so as Karl mentioned that there might be some psychological barriers as well. There might be other things about risk, as we know, Singapore, there is a huge push towards, having a more permanent position. But under current situation, things were not really that much better even before COVID started, but obviously COVID kind of accelerated some of the issues as well. Are there something that MOM is thinking about from your role in a policy to try to kind of give enough information for ones who are aspiring, but they are kind of afraid as well?
Well, first of all, I think we've been studying this issue for quite some time. So what we have seen with technology and a lot of the more innovative business models, such as those Karl and Varun have started, is that for the self-employed that are full-time, right, actually that has been fairly stable over time. But what jobs they do now has completely transformed. So a long time ago, the largest self-employed occupations were things like hawkers, taxi drivers. But actually now, that has come down quite a fair bit, right? And in the past, your content creators were letter writers sitting outside the 5-foot way, right? Now they are different, right? They are the sort of people that sign with SGAG, they write different things. So one key characteristic that we do see is the following, right? As Varun said, competition has increased tremendously. But on the other hand, the consumers have also increased tremendously, right? So what we do see is firstly that in terms of the gig economy, it can be a bit bimodal. You have a group of people that are not doing very well, that are suffering intense competition. Then for the ones that are doing the best, your best YouTube creators and things like that, it's a more superstar kind of effect. The superstars do very well. Underneath them, there's a very large group of folks that are having a lot of difficulty. They suffer a lot of volatility. You see a lot of churn in and out. We see about a quarter of self-employed enter and leave each year. So that's something that has completely transformed. Right. So when I was growing up, there were daily rated employees. They used to hang out outside Paya Lebar MRT. Right. Every day a band came out and then they'll go to the factories and they do work. Now, actually, they don't need to do that, right? They can be based anywhere. They're much more empowered. But as a result, there's so many more delivery riders now competing for the same job. So that's something that we are very cognizant of. So on the government side, what we're trying to do is we look at the data. The bimodal part is something that we are a bit concerned about. So we want to provide the tools and the pathways to help people cope with this volatility and churn. So first of all, really helping them invest in themselves. So things like skills upgrading, placement of jobs, help them look long term. And secondly, of course, offering things to help them save for the longer term, such as CPF top-ups. We, for the older self-employed, we also recently introduced the match retirement savings schemes. And for the lower income, there's still workfare to help them. So those are some of the things that we're looking at, but we are very interested in this issue. We do want to hear from all of you learned people here, how we can better address some of these emerging challenges, and also where you see the things are headed at.
Okay. Very good. I think you highlighted all the different ways that support can be provided. But as you mentioned, this bimodality part, that there is one which might be doing it for a very long time and they are more comfortable with it. The others are going in, they are not finding it that easy in the competition. So they are just sometimes falling behind, but not having an alternative pathway or trying to protect how their future might look like. And so almost not, believing that it's like an entrepreneurial journey for them to understand that they have to save as well for the future, possibly things like giving themselves a salary than trying to go ahead and have almost a hand-to-mouth existence. So these are obviously challenging things that comes out as well. Obviously, there are other things that I just want to have a quick view of it. Are there some social stigmas which are still attached to being in the gig economy, either in a permanent level or, I mean, obviously, if you are a taxi driver or you're running a hawker center, that has been the case for a long time. That might not deal with social stigmas as much. But if you are not there, but you are doing a few jobs, a few gigs, so to say, that is there a social stigma attached, do you think? I mean, is it still in Singapore, or you feel that is kind of declining? Anyone can start. Feng-Ji, you can talk about it. Do you think there is something? You are seeing a lot of data, so that's the reason I'm asking you as well.
So I mean, it's bimodal, right? So as Karl pointed out, the ones that are on the higher part of distribution, actually there's no stigma. If anything, there is probably some desire to enter it, right?
Right.
The ones that are on the lower end of distribution, you will see some of that stigma. We are to some extent, it is also partly correlated with the treatment of their own work conditions. So that may be something they want to work on. But otherwise, that's something society has to work together on,
Okay. Very good point. Varun or Karl, you want to share something as well?
Yeah, I think it's also got a bit to do with demographics or age in that sense. So if you're a student, it's more like you're seen as a hustler getting some extra cash on the side, right? So we've had people come to do our jobs for WhyQ, and we do it at a hawker center, right? So they come, and the people who drive down in their own cars and come and do it, right? So it's very interesting, but they're just doing it as a side hustle to get some cash. But then we do see, like, I think there is increasing stigma with age. So when you go to a slightly, like, a person who's finished their studies, or a person who's now required to be a full-time, like has crossed, like probably computer university or whatever, right? Beyond a certain age, I think there is some stigma involved, but I do think it is also reducing with time, right? So we are seeing, like, as this industry grows and as it becomes more popular, I do think that the stigma is reducing.
Okay. Karl, you have already stated this sort of star status, but the star status might also give a winner take all scenario, right? It's like someone getting all the gigs, the others are kind of, unless they kind of give up on some opportunities, others are not going to find it that easy.
Yeah, I think some of the points raised earlier by the other panelists are also relevant in the content creation space. In fact, I attribute it maybe to two different groups. There are those that maybe view social media content creators as, come on, let's get a real job, guys. Add some real value to the world, get a real job, get a degree, stop wasting people's time. And then you have maybe people who are more aware, and this is really not a local phenomenon. It is a global phenomenon, right? And they have seen global stars being born into mainstream Hollywood status type, and they understand, this is going to be around for a long time. And they kind of recognize that and they accept it, right? So I think it's changing. It's certainly evolving over time. And, there is still stigma, however, and I don't think that will go away anytime soon. Yeah.
Okay. That's a fair point, and it also gives us a sort of a segue into our next kind of section, which is Feng-Ji, you mentioned about the government, different initiatives that are going on, including skills upgrading. But can you share a little bit more about it? So suppose someone who is possibly in the gig economy, but they want to look for other options as well, or they want to know a little bit more about how they can run their own business in the same format, but better. Are they going to be approached, or they have to seek help? If you want to, say a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the premise of the gig economy is really that you have to be responsible for your investing in yourselves, right?
Yeah.
What we do see in the gig economy is that full-time is stable, but actually more and more people are taking it on as a side gig. Increasingly, perhaps what you will see is a more fluid shift between permanent employment, doing some side gigs on the side, and then sometimes the weightage changes over time. Perhaps I'm in between jobs, I'm going for training, then I'll do a bit more on my side gig, maybe less of the regular employment before going back. That's the sort of equilibrium that we are sort of seeing. I suspect that's going to be the stable equilibrium over the longer term. But they have to take responsibility, right, for their own skills upgrading. The courses are available. For example, if you're an online sales person, right, you have your own online shop. That's also a pretty common self-employment, sole proprietor running an online shop. Actually, for example, we have tie-ups with the platforms to actually train our people. So as to improve your selling skills and take advantage of promotions and do data analytics. So most of these things are available. Content creation, actually, interestingly enough, there are also some skills and courses available there as well. Some of them, we also do attachments, right? Train and place. So they can do regular employment, they can then hone their skills, and then when they want to strike it on their own, they can also do that. So these are all available, but they must take responsibility for their own skills upgrading and thinking about what kind of jobs they want to take. Because that's the premise of being a gig worker, being self-employed. Is to empower you, the tools are out there, but you have to be aware that that's what you have to do. You cannot rely on HR to take care of that. You are your own HR. So that's a very important point, and I do hope that that's something that people can take away from this.
Okay, very good. Actually, we just got the data from the first survey. So there is about 47% of the audience says that they are actually gig workers or consider themselves gig workers as well. 53%. So actually a majority says they are not in the gig economy as well. So maybe we are early enough to kind of influence them to some extent, if I may call it, to kind of think carefully and prepare, right? That's sort of the guidance that Feng-Ji, you are also given, that they have to take responsibility. In fact, Kyle also mentions that, the one question that is being asked, is this a real job? Which is obviously it's kind of a very loaded question, if I may say, that, it's a rhetorical question, that it is not a real job when they are asking that question. So those are things that they have to get over. But
well, the government categorizes this as a real job, right? No one asks Tony Long whether he's doing a real job.
Right. That's
but he's the content creator of his time, So yeah, I do recommend watching him. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, fantastic. So indeed, I mean, this is something that we are looking at, and of course, the plans are put in place, how to help them, but they really need to seek help themselves as well, because there's a lot of responsibility that is there. Now, just to is there, we talked about the different workshops and other things that can actually be there to help them out as well. Now, in some sense, if I want to go back to this whole idea of the older generation who, COVID has created some unique opportunities, but also created some unique challenges, particularly the digital divide that we are talking about more and more, that might be leaving older Singaporeans kind of behind a little bit, because they've been doing the same thing for the last 40 years. They suddenly find themselves in a very unique position that they can access to different apps which are there. Their younger counterparts are probably doing this. They don't have the access. In some sense, maybe they might have a mental block, or they might not have the training at all to go in and take advantage of it, which might be good, but if you have a fear, very difficult to do. So Varun, you want to share something that how you managed to address this particular gap in your framework with particularly the hawker captains that you mentioned before?
Right. So, like Prof. Ghosh mentioned earlier as well, right? So during the circuit breaker, during the heightened awareness, especially older generation hawkers did suffer a lot. And we've seen that firsthand. And how we actually overcame this was using our hawker captains, because our hawker captains are sort of a bridge between offline and online for hawkers, right? So by using these hawker captains, hawkers were able to get their food delivered without using any technology. So we did not make it mandatory for hawkers to use technology, but our hawker captains still needed to have an app, right? But the hawkers did not need to use any technology. So through this, we even got some illiterate hawkers who completely had no clue how to use any digital devices, onto our platform and just got them to start delivering their food. Now, coming to the second part of the hawker captains, right? So the hawker captains, they have an app. They collect food from different hawker stalls. They label it, pack it, and they keep it ready for a delivery courier to pick up and deliver. So that's what we do, right? Now, the hawker captains do need to use an app, but at WhyQ, because also driven by the fact that orders surged and we are facing sort of a crunch of manpower, we decided to put in some more effort into training our hawker captains. And what this enabled us to do was also open up this particular role to the elderly, right? So we understand at WhyQ that someone like an elderly person might not be that tech savvy to begin with, but we do a couple of days of in-person training, really show them how things work. And in Singapore, mostly you see people do know how to use a smartphone. So it maybe took longer than someone who's a student, but these people also were able to pick up how things worked. And then what we saw was that for us, the people who joined, like elderly people who joined, would go on to work and stay within this particular environment for a longer period of time. So then this became a very reliable resource for us. So that is something that we started encouraging and actively like spreading the word at hawker centers, distributing flyers at hawker centers to get elderly people to actually sign up for this role and try it out, because we believe we created it in a way that it could fit not both the students and elderly people and everyone in between.
Okay, okay, very good. Now, I wanted to kind of raise an issue with Karl first, and then I will ask Feng-Ji to see, give your take on it. Now, when you are looking at, this is going back to not just the digital divide. When we are looking at older Singaporeans, obviously one concern is benefits. Younger ones who are going in, they might not care as much, whether it's healthcare and other things that are there, which are provided oftentimes by the employers. But when you are your own self-employer, you might have to worry about that as well. What if scenarios, that what if something happens, maybe a work-related accident or something. Are there some concerns that you see from members of SGAG as well, that they are kind of asking that if there are any support that can be provided, which is more like employee benefits, even though they are not traditional employees?
Well, I think for content creators that we work with, I would maybe give an age range of maybe 18 to 25 years old, right? And I think the reality of being in this generation, in this age group, is that, again, culturally, when you're in this phase of life and being in Singapore, you're probably studying, you're probably living with your parents, you're probably, not going to be paying rent for yourself, for example. And culturally, this is something that is very normal in Singapore as compared to maybe in the US, where once you move to college, you have to move out, you have to pay your own student loans and all that. But I think in Singapore, for a middle class average Singaporean, that is the reality. Your parents are paying rent, or rather paying the mortgage for the house. And therefore, the kind of lens that many of them take does not look so far. And I think that is something that perhaps is a generational thing. We are seeing that, GDP per capita has grown so much over the last decades in Singapore. And the comfort level and the privilege that we do enjoy as a country in a developed circumstance is very different, right? So no, the reality is many of them don't think about the future. They don't think about using benefits and CPF and savings, and they know that being maybe a content creator, earning per gig, earning per job, is something that it's good cash now and might not last forever. And I think that's also in the psyche of being a modern day, working citizen, right? Because you're not expected to keep the job you have now for a long time. It works now, it works for you, it might not work for you down the road. That's totally fine as well. So no, I don't actually see them talking about these concerns. Surprisingly, I've never been asked that question, but yeah, wow. No.
Well, there's always a first time. So maybe I'll ask Feng-Ji to sort of, because the good thing about what I find out in among policymakers in Singapore, of course, the fact that they are actually way more forward looking oftentimes. And given that we are really a little red dot and we are in the we have a lot of good examples and a lot of big examples around us. We might actually look at it and see, how the future might change. So one such thing, just to give you an example, is this whole issue on employee rights, which is happening on two sides of Atlantic. So one side, when you look at California, where Uber and Lyft, for example, particularly drivers, are asking for employee benefits, and the ruling there from the California Supreme Court, as far as I remember, is that they had stayed this order, that that was not something accepted right away. But then again, when you come to UK and Italy and I think France as well, that is as a much more sympathetic kind of view, that they are really employees. So are there some challenges or stress that is happening on the two sides of the story? So one side is the employees are asking, even though they're technically gig economy workers, are asking for more rights. On the other hand, businesses are saying that if I have to pay those benefits, then our business model would not work. So do you have some sense or any thought along these lines?
Well, that's something that there's a committee studying that. So that's a generic answer to a lot of things. But I think just say a few things, right? I think first of all, we do hear the desire for certain types of insurance and benefits from self-employed, right? So that's also why the government actually has worked with insurers on prolonged medical insurance, prolonged medical leave insurance. So that's something we've done. So we can of course do some group buy to help this group of self-employed who are otherwise not well organized to benefit from some rates. On the broader issue of platform workers, I think one thing that we are a little bit concerned about, which PM also shared during the National Day rally, is this, right? So the issue is some of these platforms, in terms of the bargaining power, is actually quite asymmetric. And in fact, the relationship and control that they exert is actually very similar to an employer. So if that's the case, then we need to think about how to, we can't really say that they're really bargaining on their own in a very fair way, right? That's for the case where the platform is so large that they're basically a monopoly in the sector, right? So if that's the case, there could be some form of market failure, and then we have to think about what's the best way to do this. For example, whether we allow unions to come and help them represent, right? So that's what we did with daily rated employees, who are pretty much the original platform workers, right? In fact, a union helped to represent them and help, argue for more fair contracts and things like that, here and there. But I wouldn't say that may be the right solution going forward. It may not also be what the platform workers want. So that's something that I think the committee will probably consult quite widely, and also including the platforms as well as the platform workers to see what actually is best for them.
Okay.
I think our bigger concern is more that this becomes a way to avoid either employment protections. Already half our low-wage workers are self-employed, right? If that's the case, then it becomes a way to avoid actually paying protections or actually arbitraging regular employment. We're also concerned, for example, about the housing and retirement. So those are some of the things that we're probably looking at. How we can better support them as well.
Okay, very good, very good. So I'll wrap up towards the Q&A. I think we got quite a few questions already. So in maybe about 30 seconds or so, if you have some parting thoughts about, before the Q&A session, about how some of the growth that you see in your sorry, just a second. So a growth that you see in this particular space, about how the gig economy might kind of progress in your area or your perception. Maybe 30 seconds, so a very quick wrap up before we go into Q&A. Feng-Ji, you can start.
Yeah, so we really can't tell how the gig economy will change because technological disruption is so fast, and we also have entrepreneurs coming up. So I think I just really want to say three things, right, that I think are evergreens. So first is invest in yourself, right? Think about the career pathways, skill upgrading pathways. What are the jobs I need to do better, right? That's important, right? And also try to pivot towards things that are making you money versus those that don't. Second is take care of yourself and your family. So think about your personal finance. Compounding a youth is your advantage. Save for retirement early. Better to have save when you can still work, as opposed to being forced to save when you can't, right? And third, play the longer game. So play the long game. Think about where you can head to. Try to have some kind of differentiation factor. You want to be on one side of the bimodal distribution, not on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah, so just these three things.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so Varun, if you want to share, because you are in the financial inclusion space as well. So if you have some thoughts about, on how the industry is actually going as well.
Right. So I think the points that Feng-Ji mentioned, I think they're very important and crucial to the long-term well-being of this gig economy, right? Because we've seen, and I think you mentioned, you need to be your own HR, which is important here, but that's something that is often overlooked, because we've had people asking us, like, does this job pay CPF, right? And for them, they prefer if it doesn't pay CPF. And like that is, I think, for the people who are in part of this gig economy, they need to realize that this is something that if they're doing it long term, then they need to have that longer term vision. And I think that there will be structures built to support these people because of the rapid pace that the gig economy is growing at, and it's here to stay, and it's only going to grow. So I think structures will be built, but I think, yeah, the people in the gig economy and even the companies who are using these gig economy workers do have to have that longer term view. I think that is very, very important.
Okay, cool. Karl, if you want to kind of give a quick wrap before we go into Q&A.
Sure thing. Well, I think for platforms, for example, social media platforms, it's quite clear that they definitely want to they are building actually incentives for more creators to stay on platforms by paying you for content creation. On top of that, I think brands are already very much inclined to pay creators or as a way of distribution of some of their messaging. So I think it's definitely here to stay. And I think a lot more young people will definitely be jumping on this trend to become content creators themselves. And it's certainly something that can't be stopped, I think, for the foreseeable future, because the platforms are really going in that direction. But it's something fun. I think it's something great as an alternative side income for students, especially. And yeah, definitely looking forward to developments in this space.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's take a look at some questions. There are quite a few questions that are coming kind of fast and furious as well. So one is something that we already discussed, but maybe if you want to share some thoughts, these are all in your in the tech space. Let me just ask this question first. So how do you reconcile the lack of employer CPF contribution with long-term feasibility of the gig economy? So this is from the business side, I guess. And would you say that the gig economy is something to be considered only as a side gig and not as a full-time job, and that one should try to find out traditional full-time job on the longer run for long-term financial security simply because the employer CPF associated with traditional full-time jobs? Feng-Ji, you have something to share about this, or?
Well, actually, right, if you are self-employed, there are many avenues for you to top up your own CPF. So the idea is that you are now your own employer. You can take advantage of these schemes to top up your own CPF, and there are tax benefits that also accord to you if you top your own CPF. So that's the basic principle, right? So if in fact you're on, of course, the other end of the distribution, you should be empowered to do that on your own. Right. Now, as to whether it's something that you recommend salary employment versus self-employment, I think that's really for the individual to decide, right? Because an individual really has to know what he's good at. Right, and what his individual circumstances are. So for example, the self-employed percentage has been 8 to 12% in Singapore for a very long time. The reason why is actually that a proportion of the workforce needs the flexibility and needs the empowerment in order to live their lives, right? So no matter what happens, they're going to take up a self-employment thing. You can't say that what they're choosing is wrong. Their life circumstances are different. But I would say that the most important thing is regardless of whether employer CPF or not, please remember to save for yourself. If you are self-employed, top up CPF regularly. Treat it as the bond part of your portfolio. If you want to take them more risk through equities, you can of course do other things. Remember to save for the emergency because you won't be healthy forever. Things can happen, right? And remember to insure yourself and protect yourself and your family, right? So these are the things that I always tell all of them. And then you have to decide if the self-employment is not working out for you, please do pivot and take up one of our schemes to move to salary employment. On the other hand, if your side gig earns you more income than your main gig, please carry on, So that's how the market works. So please take advantage of it, and please do exercise the level of literacy.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question is coming in as, how does the gig economy change the job landscape for us fresh graduates? So either Varun or Karl, you are both SMU grads, so I think this might be questions coming from here as well. How does the gig economy change the job landscape for fresh graduates? Any thoughts?
Right. I mean, so from WhyQ's perspective, at least, right? And I think it does not really change the landscape for an SMU graduate. I don't see this happening. I mean, it could be a good way to supplement income between jobs until you get your first job. So at least that support is there. So I think it adds some support, but it does not detract from the overall job environment that you're facing.
Okay. Karl?
Yeah, likewise, I think it's if anything, there are more opportunities, right? I think also depending on, for example, if you're taking a year off after graduation to figure out what you want to do in life, right? I think there are so many opportunities today to keep a side income going without committing to anything full time. I think when maybe I graduated, there were certainly not that many options. And I think that's always going to help for you to maybe take some time. And if anything, it builds to the option. So nothing negative coming out of this, in my opinion.
Okay. Now, I mean, there is some questions about if someone aspires or have some thoughts about preparing to go into the gig economy. You know, it's like a very early stage to become an entrepreneur. Are there some preparation, like mindsets, that has to be changed in order to do that? Because obviously the safety idea that we have on a permanent job is always there, right? We have almost traditionally made to think about in that line. Any particular thought about going into freelancing that that you can think of? Anyone can contribute. Any thought process, anything in particular that you have to think about? I mean, I can attach it to the next question as well, that, you know, I mean, are there actual concerns that you have to kind of think about, like insurance, for example? So insurance coverage, is it sufficient to know how much you want to know, how much you need, and how much money you need to put in, how much money you need to set out if you want to go ahead and go into your own path and try to be your own boss? Any particular thoughts about the transition, if someone is willing, because they have to make an active choice whether they want to go in there or not? Any thoughts? Yeah, Karl or Varun, that is there any preparation? Yeah, Varun, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it comes back to the same thing that we've been discussing, right? The person needs to decide, is this a short-term thing or is this a long-term thing, right? If you're a student, it's either a side gig or it's something you're taking a gap year, sure, go for it, right? Get that extra cash, that's completely fine. You don't need to think about the long-term perspective there, right? But if you're doing this, and if you're an elderly person, you already have the funds saved up, then again, it's supplemental income, right? But if you're doing this as your career and you're doing this as like for your bread and butter, I think then that becomes very crucial for you to have that longer term perspective and actually make sure that you're not just working hand to mouth, which I do feel can happen very easily in this industry.
Okay. All right. Okay, very good. So I think we are kind of out of time as well. I wanted to thank once again all the panelists about, you know, a lot of food for thought about how, if at all you want to transition, you want to talk about it or think about it, you know, of course, a lot of help is available to understand that you are in control over your future. So this whole theme about making a conscious decision and seek help when you have to. And there are lots of peer groups available. And of course, Money Sense and others are available too, to help you to have an upgraded skill if you want to do something else. Maybe, you know, have a influencer crash course, if I may say so. That would be a great thing to start. So once again, thank you so much to all the panel members. Really appreciate your time. And let me pass it on over to Kyle for the next segment.